So, hello everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of the Careers with Purpose Summit. I've got to say, I'm so happy to have with me today Denise Brosseau. Now, Denise is CEO of Thought Leadership Lab, and essentially, Denise, what Thought Leadership Lab does is they consult with entrepreneurs, with executives, and leaders on how they can increase their impact, increase their influence, expand their impact, and gain recognition. And Denise works with leaders. She works with leaders to develop a thought leadership culture to increase recruitment and retention, but also to attract customers as well. And the reason I feel so lucky that we have Denise today is because, in essence, what Denise's book, and I'll show you the book just here, and I recommend you get it. Hopefully, it's the right way around. It's the wrong way around, but yeah, it's. I recommend you get this book. Ready to be a thought leader. You can get that on Amazon. And as I said, the reason I'm so excited today to have Denise is because something that J. Corin Gilbert said when I interviewed him in terms of the sorts of people that purpose-led organizations look to hire. So he talked about smart critical thinkers. He talked about problem-solving ability. He talked about intellectual curiosity, but he also talked about a drive for mastery. And what Denise talks about is essentially in the book and in her role with Thought Leadership Lab, just encapsulates all of that. So Denise, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. Could you just start out, Denise? Because again, as I said, I've just started reading your book. I don't read books that often, but your book has got me encapsulated and engrossed. And it talks about how you went from being an unknown essentially to be basically, your career skyrocketing. Could you just talk us through how you got from where you were then to where you are now, please?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, early career started out trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up, like most of us, and ended up into the technology industry and eventually got an MBA. And then as I stepped out of my MBA, I ended up connecting with this group of amazing women who were starting an organization, really trying to address one painful statistic here in the US, which was all about women and venture capital. So at the time when we started, less than 1% of venture capital funding was going to women entrepreneurs. And we just thought, there's something wrong with this picture. So we kind of came together, 5 or 6 of us, most of us had gone to business school together, and we decided to start an organization to address that. And eventually, very pretty quickly, I became CEO, my co-founder became chair, and we put a board together, started doing events, still working in the tech industry. And over time, had this opportunity to step out, lead that organization full time, grow it to a number of offices across the US, and make a difference for this question. What is it that's holding women back? What can we do to move forward the education they need, build role models, help them connect to one another, connect them to all the ecosystem partners. And at the same time, I had an opportunity to become what I call an accidental thought leader. So here I am. I've got this platform, this opportunity as in this role to get out and speak to people, speak to the media, get out and really have this bully pulpit on an issue that I cared deeply about and be able to showcase these women who were changing the numbers and who were changing the world. And that is what led me to do the work I do today. I really now get that opportunity to help others to do that maybe a little bit less as an accident and more with a plan.
Excellent. And tell us a bit more, because I'm really, as I said, I'm intrigued with the book, and it's one of those books that you just, when you start reading it, you hear the children screaming in the background, but you don't want to put it down. It's that
That makes me
engaging.
happy.
Uh,
Yeah, I was really writing a book to my younger self. I was writing the book that I wish I could have picked off the shelf when I was in those early days of this role, because I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how important it was to have a crisp message. I had no idea how important it was to build a tribe of others who were challenge, facing that same challenge and addressing it from different perspectives. I had no idea how important it was to use others as my activators and evangelists and mouthpiece for my ideas, not just have it be about me and my small team. And I learned so many things the hard way, and I try now with my clients to teach them better ways, and I learn from them every day. Working with these amazing nonprofit leaders and entrepreneurs and executives, I learned so much about better ways, and now there's so many more tools. So now the book is both a set of steps, 7 steps, but also what are the questions you should be asking yourself? What are the resources? How can you do some of the things that you really need to do to be most effective?
And that's the beauty of the book, is that you have lots of authors of books, thought leaders, leaders who write books, but it's very fluffy and very woolly. But this book is it's almost like a workbook. Almost, it tells you the steps, it tells you how, as Denise said, it tells you the questions that you should ask yourself. And I was there thinking to myself, and in fact, we're going to go into a bit later on the whiff. That Denise talks about.
One of my favorite things.
I love it. But it's as I said, I'll put a link below so everybody can check it out for themselves. Denise, I mean, from what I've read and from what I've seen of you and from what I've heard in terms of thought leadership, it's that these are the ultimate people in terms of finding purpose in work. What are your thoughts on, I suppose, what are the benefits then on achieving that particular, I suppose, milestone in your career?
Well, I don't think it's for those other people. I mean, I do think thought leadership is for many, many different people. It isn't for everyone. I'm not going to go that far. But what I find is that it's either a calling. You think about something like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or you think about major initiatives that were started around some specific girl that was something bad happened to, or a mother or a family member who's had something terrible happen. Black Lives Matter is one of those initiatives that's really grown out of specific issues and very much in a cause related. But others I think of as thought leaders around change that's happening within their city, changes that are happening within their organization, within their company, and they just want to scale that. They see, for example, one of my very first clients was working on this issue of why was her company, which was serving a hugely diverse state, California, why was it all the senior employees were white men over 50? We're not representing and we're not offering opportunities for jobs to people who represent our community. And so she created this program, which is called Power Pathway. It was in the utility industry, which was all about how do we provide a training program that gets people ready for this very big test that they had to take to get into these jobs, and get people who are from disadvantaged communities, veterans, and how do we get them into our job and get them into jobs in our company and get them to really grow? Well, okay, great. Do that in my company, but then you look across the whole utility industry, it's the same problem. What if we took this same program and scaled it? So I think about people like that, change agents who've made a difference in one place and either want to grow it across their company, across their community, across their industry. Those people need to be thought leaders too, because those ideas, the impact that they've had and the steps that they've learned, that's what they need to be sharing. And that to me is why I wanted to empower those kinds of thought leaders as well. Both and, it's not either or.
Mm-hmm. And that, I suppose that goes a long way to, I suppose, telling us what a thought leader is, because I think, well, from my perspective, it had the title thought leader had an air of mystique about it, an air of sort of, an elitist almost element to it. But it's not like that at all, is it? It's that's definitely not what your book says. But it's not like that. Are there any, I suppose, examples that you can give? I mean, I've interviewed Robin Chase.
Who's wonderful.
I know Robin Chase. Robin was great. But can you give us examples of the typical, or if there is a typical thought leader that you could tell us about?
Well, I'll give you one that I think is a great example. Here's this guy, Ron Finley, who is based down in South Central Los Angeles, and he calls himself the guerrilla gardener. So here's a guy, right? He's an artist. That's his full-time work. But one day he looks out his window and he's thinking, what if I could just plant a garden in my front yard? So he plants a garden, and not like I would plant a garden where, I might plant one or two flowers. He plants a serious vegetable garden. Well, what happens? A few weeks fast forward, he gets a letter from the city saying, tear your garden out
Oh,
because
wow.
that's not your land. That's what they told him. It's city land. And he thought, okay, I live in South Central. There is nothing for miles around about fresh food. We don't have fresh food produce markets. We don't have farmers markets. We have strip malls. And he says, this is wrong. Kids are, we have obesity in this country. We have an enormous amount of challenge with access to food and health. Why are we doing that? So he starts this petition, right? And he gets hundreds of people to sign it. He takes the petition to City Hall and he convinces them that instead of going against him, they should get on board. And they get on board and he gets access to build gardens in behind homeless shelters. He gets access to abandoned lots. And he starts bringing together this whole guerrilla gardener troupe. Okay, great. Made change in his own city. Absolutely wonderful. Well, now let's take it to the next step. But what if we could share what we did and what worked in this community and take it more broadly? So he does a TEDx talk, he creates a website, he shares all these tools and what didn't work and what did work. And so now he started a movement, along with many others, about what it takes to do what he's doing and bring access to healthy food to urban communities that are underserved. Like, okay, so I think about somebody like that. That's very different from my story in the utility industry, but both of those people have the same impulse. Like, I want to make change here because what's going on is not okay. And then I want to broaden that. So I think about thought leaders as not somebody who has a Twitter feed and is telling you what they had for lunch. Like, that's complete, nor is it, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company only. I mean, yes, those people need to be good at drawing out the future and envisioning a big, powerful change that needs to take place. But there's also everyday people, you and me kind of people, who believe in what they've done or what is underway, and they just want to make it easier for the next group. They just want to make it faster. They want to share their lessons learned. And that, to me, is the ultimate difference between a leader and a thought leader. Leaders are leading change. They need followers. Thought leaders are about, how do I scale this? They go from one to one or one to a group to many, and they realize that by empowering many people to capture those ideas and move them forward, that's when real change happens. That's when movements can occur. Sure, that's the big picture, but even just a change across this big organization, you can't do it by yourself. You've got to get others on board. So the steps and the techniques are all about how do you enroll people, how do you think about what's in it for them, et cetera.
Well, by the sounds of that, he went off his instinct, off something that's driving him, an impulse that was driving him from inside to make, like you said, make change, make positive change, to share with people. But are there any, I suppose, other typical traits that they, a thought leader might exhibit at all, or is it just that drive?
I think the drive is a piece of it, and particularly because these things take time. I think about my own drive to change this number of 1%. I started that initiative 20 plus years ago, and we are only somewhere between 6 and 8%. 20 years, that's not a lot of progress. Some people would say, oh, you went from less than 1 to 6 to 8. Huge change. I don't consider that huge change. I want 50%. So the reason you need passion and commitment is that you need to stick to it, that none of this happens overnight, whether it be Black Lives Matter, whether it be feminism, whether it be whatever, all of these challenges and challenging changes that need to be underway, whether it be access to healthy food, whether it be change in the utility industry, none of this happens overnight. So if you can have the passion to drive you forward, you're more likely to stick to it, and you're also more likely to, I think, enroll. So I think that's another real trait of people who are thought leaders. They engage in enrolling people and getting people on board with their ideas. I think so. It isn't all about them, and it isn't all about my ego. I'm not doing this to self-aggrandize. I'm doing this, as I say, thought leadership is not about being known. It's about being known for making a difference. That has to be part of that drive as well. There's a passion, but there's also a commitment to making a difference. And then I would say the other piece of it is the stick-to-itiveness, the resilience. Like pick yourself up and carry, brush yourself off when people are mean or say no or say this will never happen. Like so many people told me my ideas for starting a venture conference for women were crazy. And all my clients get told in various ways that they're crazy in whatever manner. They never use those words, but they always have some, we've tried that, it can't be done, who are you? You don't know anything, you're not an expert. So they have the outside voices and they have the inside voices. So that resilience as well, to keep going, to be courageous about what you have underway.
Well, that's wonderful. In a sense, it sounds like, you know, thought leaders are born, maybe not made. I don't know, but
No,
can
I
you?
don't think so. I think you are made. I mean, I wouldn't say I was born to be a thought leader. I really got a chance. I got a platform. I got a role. I got an opportunity. I got an issue. Those are all reasons that I became a thought leader. For most of my clients, they just feel angry about something, or they feel that they actually have a chance to make a difference about something. They would never, you wouldn't have picked them out from the line of the 2-year-olds or the 5-year-olds as being that they weren't necessarily leaders as children. They weren't necessarily someone that everybody said, oh, she's going to make that difference. Or no. I mean, you think about this guerrilla gardener guy, or my client Vaughn in the utility industry. Some of them probably showed some traits early on that they didn't take no for an answer. But I don't know that you would have necessarily imagined that they would, because some of it's also sometimes opportunity. The fact that I had this job and there was a trend that was happening in the United States at the same time around women's entrepreneurship. The fact that my client in the utility industry was working at the same time as a green jobs initiative that Obama was pushing. So part of this sometimes is, first of all, figuring out those trends and aligning to them, but sometimes it is also about timing. Robin Chase, who you talked about, this terrible situation of all of the challenges for global warming. It's not a trend that's a short trend, but her alignment to that and eliminating green gas emissions has really driven her efforts in many, many ways as well. So part of it I teach people is to look around. What are the trends I can align to, or what are the trends I want to push against, so that you don't have to wait for that innate leadership technique trait that you were born with. You can develop it because it's something you care about, and by aligning to sort of the slipstream of the change that's underway.
And in a moment, I'm going to ask Denise about how to actually at least begin to get some tips from Denise in terms of how to identify a niche that you can align with as well. But that's great, Denise. And in your book, you describe the idea of thought leadership as career insurance. That's great to me, because there's so much uncertainty when it comes to careers and jobs. You never know from one day or 1 month or 1 year to the next how long you might be in a role. But can you tell us what you mean by that, please, Denise?
Well, I think about how many types of insurance I own, house insurance and car insurance, right? But nobody ever offered me career insurance. And as I started to work with leaders 8 years ago on this journey from leader to thought leader, what I saw is that these are the people that were getting headhunted. These are the people that people followed. These are into a new job or came to the company to work with them. These are the people that you see that the skills that they have are actually skills you want in your organization. And often they're the skills that others want to be near, So I think of it as career insurance because people want to hire you and they want to promote you and they want you to be the person that they affiliate with. Well, that's the best career insurance you can get, because people are going to recommend you for the next opportunity when the past one falls to pieces, or you're on such a mission to make change that next one might be more apparent to you than if you're just kind of doing the to-do list that's put in front of you by whatever the job is that you just got.
I suppose as well that it seems all the people that I know who are, to me at least, who are thought leaders, for example, Aaron Hurst, for example, or Richard Barrett, they all seem to be like ahead of the curve. So they I don't know if it's predictive powers, or I don't know, ability to foresee into the future, but that ability seems to, like you said, well, like it seems to me anyway, draw people to them because they want to have advice. They want to know what's coming. Is that also part of the idea of career insurance as well?
I think it can be. And I'd love to see more of that with folks because part of what that means is that ability to look around corners. But where does that come from? I mean, you're not born with that. It happens by the fact that you're surrounding yourself by lots of people with new ideas. You're reading, you're going to conferences, you're stepping outside your comfort zone. You're not in your little box of I'm only going to read the people I agree with. You're getting out to communities and surrounding yourself by people who question you and
Oh,
challenge you.
Denise, I've
That
lost
to
you
me
there.
gives you.
Are you still there, Denise?
I am. You can't hear me?
Oh, you're back. The
Oh,
video stopped
sorry.
for a minute there. So
Oh,
the last
here
thing,
I am.
can I ask you that question again on what was the question again? It was about seeing around corners. Could you start that bit
Yeah,
again for me, please?
sure. So I don't think that with being a futurist, as it were, or that ability to see around corners, I don't think that's innate. I think that's something we develop. And the way we develop it is by getting out of our comfort zone. So what I love about folks as they develop their thought leadership is it gives them the opportunity to go to new conferences. They start to find people they want to follow that they never knew before. They start to be in conversation, to listen to podcasts, to read new books, to get out of their comfort zone. And what does that go to? I think about Steve Jobs, and what he talked about was that it was all about connecting dots. I think that the only way you see around corners is to be able to start connecting dots that no one else is seeing. Well, the way you do that is you have to have a lot more dots. So the only way we do that is to go out and be curious, to ask lots of questions, to surround ourselves by people who will ask us questions, to read widely and think deeply, and then leaving ourselves time for reflection is another piece. That sense that yes, I can spend time in the shower and little light bulbs might go on, but more light bulbs are going to go on. Like one weekend every few months, I take and I just go away to a friend's little beach cottage. It's a tiny little place, but I just go and I write. And I just try to put together the things that I'm seeing because in my natural busy life, when I'm on the road, talking to people every day, I don't have that time to reflect. And I think that's an important component.
Well, that's wonderful. And for those with the curiosity to want to begin to, I suppose, dip their toe into, eventually taking their own path. Denise, as I said in the book, it's a step-by-step guide on how to do just that. Denise has pointed out 7 steps actually in the process. Denise, could you talk us through those 7 steps in becoming a thought leader, please?
Absolutely. So I think it really begins with having your niche, figuring out where do I want to play. It doesn't mean you'll stay there forever, but the truth is that if people know which box you're in, if you want to think of it as a box, people will send you the opportunities and they will know what your affiliations are and what you care about. So picking that can be a bit of a challenge. So my whole first chapter is really about how do I find my niche? How do I find those trends that I want to align to? And then importantly, as you mentioned earlier, that whiff. And whiff for me is the what if future. I'm scared by that word vision. When people say, what's your vision for the future? People freeze. I don't have a vision for the future. So what I try to do to work on instead is like, what if? So for me, what if women had 50% of the venture capital funding in the US? From my first client, it's like, what if the people who worked in the company reflected the community that was around them and the community that company served. Those are bigger what if questions. Now, I'm not going to get to 50% in my lifetime in all likelihood unless they change some big legislation, which may happen, as it has in other countries. But the bigger whiff is what got people excited to get on board because not everybody was going to join my organization, but there was a lot of people. The other thing that happens when you have a big whiff is you see who else is aligned, who else is in your tribe. So there were people who were starting venture funds focused on women entrepreneurs. There was people starting accelerators for women entrepreneurs. There was people starting incubators. There was people, all these different groups were working towards the same future. So I encourage people in that very first step to find the niche, find the trends, and find the whiff, because that's where it all begins. So that's sort of step 1. That makes sense?
It does, and that the idea of vision seems so nebulous, and it seems so difficult to grasp. Whereas if you talk about it in the sense of the whiff, then it just grabs you straight away. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
And I think people get excited by that because often they've been articulating that anyway. Like, what if we could? You know, they do have that
Exactly.
what if question. They've been arguing about it. Okay, so that's sort of step one. Step two is now which role or which path are you going to take to bring that future about? So if you are looking to change community access to fresh food in South Central Los Angeles, this guy, Ron Finley, he starts this whole guerrilla gardener team, and that was his role. He was going to get the rights and the access, but he was also going to bring the people together. Well, that's one way you can do it. There's probably 50 things you could do to have access to fresh food in South Central Los Angeles. What you want to be doing in this step is figuring out which path are you taking, which change are you bringing about to make that future occur? In my case, like, we could have done a venture fund, we could have done an accelerator, we could have done all these things, but what we did was we formed a trade association to bring the women together and be part of the ecosystem that helped them to get the training and the expertise and the connections they needed. That was our little piece. So this second step is about figuring out what piece is yours, testing it with people, getting people to beat you up a little bit about it, figuring out what the no's are, what's already been tried, and then, identifying your role. So that's step two. Step three then is, okay, now I know I want to start this effort, this initiative, this program, this project, this software, whatever it is you're doing. Now you got to get some people on board with that. Now, who's going to be your champions? Who's going to be your advocates? Who's going to be maybe on your team? Who's going to help you? Who's going to bring their followers on board to showcase your ideas? Who's willing to put their network at your disposal? So that's that sort of third piece. I call it activate your advocates, and that's it. Again, it's that piece from going from one to many, to really being able to more broadcast and build followership.
Excellent. Excellent.
Can't do that often in those first stages. Okay, stage four. Are we ready for stage four?
Yeah,
Or you
ready
want to
for
ask one
stage
question
four?
in the
Yes,
meantime?
please go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so step four is the one that I'm so fascinated by when I get out and talk about this topic, and that's what I call putting your I on the line, as in the letter I, putting yourself on the line. What I see over and over again, no matter who I speak to, no matter which organizations or companies I speak for, or conferences, I speak for communities of all different kinds, ages, backgrounds, cultures, religions, and everybody has something that holds them back. It's either my religion says I shouldn't put myself in the spotlight, my family says I shouldn't, my boss says, my whatever. There's 100 reasons not to step forward, to not take that first step, to not be the one. There's so many voices in our own head and in our own community and in our own family. So this piece is about how do I get over that? How do I get over what one of my clients calls the itty bitty shitty committee?
I love that. I love that.
And so this chapter is really, what are those rules for resilience? What are the ways in which you can pick yourself up? And some of it's skill building. Some of it's learning how to speak well in public. Some of it's learning how to write better. Some of it is about how do I get people to come to get together with me, be a better convener. So some of it's skills, some of it's behavior, some of it's attitudes, some of it's champions, having others around you who can be your cheerleaders. So that's sort of the middle of the conversation. The next step is the one I most learned when I was what I learned most in writing this book, which was the step five. And step five is about codifying your lessons learned. Mm-hmm. This is the difference between that stage of, I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to help others do it. And that's the writing the blueprint, marking down the steps, building the framework, showing others the way. So you start your first initiative, you've hopefully had a little success, you've made a few mistakes, showing others what you did. So that first community garden, that first Power Pathway program, that first company you started, but then getting out and sharing those ideas so that others can follow in your footsteps. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. It really does. And I just wanted to actually go back slightly to the putting your eye on the line. Just had a quick question about that, because when you're putting yourself out there, you're exposing yourself basically to all sorts of things coming from different directions. And how personally did you build your resilience, build your sort of your shield against
Yeah.
against all of that from the itty bitty shitty committee, as you put it.
I think it was a couple different pieces for me. One is being in this role. I had, we were building our members and we're building our board. So over time, we had 1,200 members across the U.S. So kind of everywhere I went, there were people who were excited by what we were doing. So spending time with them. Secondly, having this leadership team, both my board and my staff, that were, of course, very aligned. Third, it was finding my tribe, finding these other organizations and individuals, mostly women, but not all, who were working on the same issue, so that I felt like, woohoo, we're in this together, so we could celebrate and so on. But I still had my moments. We had struggles, running out of money when the economy went bad. We had people I had my naysayers. Even after we had things going, we had people who would pick a hole or poke their nose into our business and tell us what we were doing wrong. There are those moments that are hard. And I look back at one of the things that I did by accident that was so valuable. I was doing a new brochure for the organization. And so I sent out to everybody in the community, hey, just tell us one thing that the organization's done for you. So we were maybe 6 or 7 years old by this time. And we got this flood of these lovely personal notes from people, small things and big things that we had helped people do. And I just put them into a folder. We used some of them on the brochure and on the website, but I just stuck them all in a folder. And fast forward a year or two later, when the economy really went on the skids here in the Valley, and I was just having a tough time. I thought with the organization, honestly, we were so close to running out of money. And I remember going into work one day, depressed and upset and just worried. And I remember thinking, what about those letters? And I went and I double clicked on that folder and I opened them and I just started reading, and tears are going down my face as I'm looking at these and I'm saying, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is what it's all about. This is why I'm here. This is the difference I'm making. And that's why, going back to that quote, it's not about me. It's not about putting this thing on the door. It's about these people and the impact we're having on these women entrepreneurs. That's what I'm here for. And if I can have those letters, so whatever you can do to have your equivalent of those letters, those thank you notes, those keep going pieces, that's what kept me going, honestly, more than anything.
Yeah, having those advocates, the support network. I think I've mentioned this before, but a lot of people tend to think that with their career, it's all about going it alone, and it's about making, doing things alone, and achieving this and that. But having that support from professionals, from close companions, from your tribe, from people who just love what you're doing, it sounds like what drove you forward and kept you going.
Well, it reminds me of that. When we grew up, we all had these superheroes, and they seem to be a single person. But lately, we've been seeing the Fantastic Four, and they come together, and they're so much more powerful. I think about that. You need your Fantastic Four. You need your people who have their own skill set, their own shields, their own force fields, as it were. And together, you are far stronger. And as you support one another, you learn as well. Oh, that's what's working for them. Or you get to align with their allies in a way that you didn't have those allies before. So I think you just gave me a great blog post. I'm going to write a blog post on finding your Fantastic Four.
Excellent. Good. Please do. And I'll share it. Please do.
Thank you.
And I interrupted you when you were talking about the next step, because that was more around
codifying.
Codifying.
Write it down. Yeah, this idea that these, if you had a blueprint, just like why I wrote the book, I wanted the blueprint, I wanted the steps, I wanted everything. So I'm always encourage people to think, pull up PowerPoint and pull up the Smart Art section of PowerPoint and look at all those frameworks and think, how could I do this in a framework so that people can see instantly? And I go back to that very first framework I ever saw as a child was Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? Right?
We
all learned in elementary school. And I think to myself, that was such a simple framework, and yet it continues to be one of the most powerful frameworks, and it's still what's, I think, shaping the world. I think of Brexit as all about people's basic needs were not getting met, so why would they not vote to leave? So it's that framework is what I try to teach people. It's like, how can you do a framework for what you're doing? How can you simplify it into one image that showcases? And not everything is an image. Sometimes it's a set of steps. Sometimes it's a video, whatever. But you need to figure out what it is that helps others to see quickly and simply what it is you're doing. And I think visual imagery is the most powerful because people are mostly visual learners. But if you can do all of it, the infographic, the video, all of it, go. It takes a while, so it doesn't always happen overnight.
I was going to say, how many versions of your image did you have to go through?
Man. A lot. And I'm still not that happy with it, honestly. I because part of what I have these 7 steps, but they're not in order. Not everybody takes them in exactly the same order. That putting your eye on the line can be before you start step 1. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to have an image that showed, and maybe you can put that in the show notes from my website, I wanted an image that showed that they're all equal and yet they're all connected. So anyway, I struggle with it. If anybody has better ideas, send them my way.
Well, definitely I'll put the image up because it's, as I said, it's the heart of this book in terms of building yourself up. And I just love books that give the step-by-step instruction because that's my mindset. I love working to steps. And like you said, the beauty of that is those steps don't necessarily come one after another. You sometimes have to go back to one.
All over the place.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you're exactly the opposite of me. I hate writing things
down.
Really? Oh, I'm a startup girl. I want the free open space. I want no manual, no box. No, don't put me in it. I want to be the first. So that was the hardest thing for me writing this book or documenting my ideas, is that I kind of like making it up as I go along. Well, that doesn't help the next person. Mm-hmm. So I had to get over myself, as it were, and also hire people who did have more of that expertise, because some of us are the ones who love the steps, and some of us are the ones who like to write the steps, and some of us are the ones who don't want any steps. So
Absolutely.
but we all need each other.
Absolutely. But we can all sort of, whether we like steps or we don't like steps, I think we can all sort of engage in and also absorb what an image has to offer. So that's what makes it beautiful. And after codifying, Denise, what comes next for us?
So the next step is what I call put yourself on shout. So what do I mean by that? Putting yourself on shout is, how am I going to get the word out about what I'm doing? So am I going to do the TED Talk? Am I going to write a blog? Am I going to do social media? Am I better on video? Am I better in small groups? Am I better convening people and gathering them together around these ideas? Everyone has a different medium that they're comfortable. Unfortunately, there are lots of mediums, and luckily you can develop yourself in each one. But and some of them you don't have permission. So, for example, some of my clients work in the financial services industry. They're not allowed to do social media. Absolutely not. And many of them are not even allowed to blog. But they can convene. They can bring people together. That's a different role as being a thought leader. But if you bring the right people, curate the right group into a room, you can move a lot of stuff forward. So I work with them instead on curating that community. Others, it's absolutely okay to be showcasing through a newsletter or through a set of emails or whatever. So this is the piece, though. And there's more to it than just, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. It's also figuring out who are my audiences? How am I going to hone my message? How am I going to overcome the resistance that's going to happen, that's going to be likely out there? And thinking it through, understanding the pitfalls that may arise. Like Sheryl Sandberg, here she is telling people, lean in. Well, what was her point? Lean in, work harder, step forward to take the bigger roles. Well, not all of us have $1 billion, so we don't, we have 3 kids, 2 kids, whatever she had. And now we're saying you got somebody to take care of those kids, don't you? No. So she didn't understand that pitfall, I don't think, was coming. So I'm always thinking through for my clients and having my clients think for themselves, what's the pitfall that could happen that could trip you up, so that we can prepare now. You're never going to know them all, but there are things like that I think would have been something she could have thought of, was going to be the natural pushback. So that's all in the shout category, is that. And then the last piece of shout, because it's SHOUT, right? The T is, how do you transform individuals into a community? And how do you go from just talking to each person individually as a follower to them being literally a community that's supporting one another? And that, I think, is when it's sort of takes it to another level.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Where are
Last
we at
step.
now? Are we on the last? No, that was number six,
We're
was
on
it?
that was number 6, so now we're at number 7.
Number
I
seven.
always have them written down here because I never want to get them out of order myself. That would be embarrassing. Okay, so the last one's what I call incite evolution or revolution. And this is a funny chapter because it's got sort of 3 pieces to it. So piece 1 is, what are you going to do to scale? And I share a whole bunch of wonderful case studies of people who have scaled their impact and influence, either through a book or through training trainers or through really documenting and showcasing their ideas broadly in a community or bringing lots of organizations together. Anyway, lots of different models. Then the second piece is about measuring. How are you measuring your impact? How do you know that you're making any progress here? For me, we were always measuring that access to venture capital. It was a very easy number. We were also measuring number of companies going public, money raised. We had specific things we were measuring. Now, to be honest, I get excited when I see my definition of thought leadership appearing. So recently, just in the last 2 weeks, I've seen it appear in 3 different places around the internet. Unexpected, surprising places. And like, woohoo! That's my moment. So you want to figure out, what are you measuring? What's success? And then the last piece, I think, is taking care of yourself. One of the things that happens to all of us is that this is a long slog. So if you don't have some refreshment principles and practices in place, whether it be quiet time, which I take on a regular basis, whether it be more sleep, whether it be having a community that you can have quiet time with, or a meditation practice, or what is it? What is it you're doing to take care of yourself on that slog? Because sometimes it's a slog. And if you really are trying to change even a small part of the world, even if just your own company or just your own community, you need to breathe.
Absolutely.
And I just had a client this past week. She quit because she just burned herself out. And I totally understood. And, we've been talking about this for a while, and she didn't do all the things she knew she should do because too much was occurring. And that's the problem. And I did too. I came so close to complete burnout when I was running my organization that I got to that place where if one more woman entrepreneur walked in my door, I was going to tell them to shut up. That's not me, as you can guess, right? That is a danger for all of us. And so I have a section in that chapter about, if you're going to create a revolution or even evolution, you got to rest along the way. You got to refresh along the way. And that's a critical component to your success.
Denise, thanks so much for giving us the summary of the 7 steps. And people, again, as I said, the more I read the book, the more I listen to you, is the more I want to actually take that I suppose that step into seeing if this is a path for me. And like anything, whether you're, I suppose, taking this path or starting out in your career or transitioning in your career, there's always an issue of, I suppose, finding what you're passionate about. Now, in the book, you talk about, from the perspective of a thought leader, about the process of penning your Venn. Can you describe that process and how it might help you to find your passion?
Sure. I thought answering that, what if I bring up I have this little diagram.
Please, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, if you bring it just a bit closer to the...
A little closer. Can you see me now?
Yes, that's good. That's good.
Okay,
yeah.
So you think about it from the perspective of that Venn diagram. Again, one of those early frameworks that we learned as children. And I think about finding your niche as looking at these 3 overlapping circles. So your Venn diagram. And the Venn diagram circles are, what is it you're passionate about? Where do you have credentials, and where do you have expertise? Now, the truth is, when we start, we may have no credentials yet. We may have credentials in an area that's completely not where we want to be doing our work. Credentials can be, absolutely about certificates and degrees, but it also can be about job titles. It can be about the companies we work for. It can be about having accomplished a specific big project or a big initiative. So that's all credentials. But expertise is what are the skills I bring to the table? Can I convene people? Can I showcase good ideas? Do I have skills in the actual area that I'm talking about, whether it be women's leadership or accountancy or whatever your arena is? So that's the skill base, the expertise. And then the third piece, which is this passion, I call it, what are you committed to? So think thinking about that for a minute, it's like there's so many things that we are excited about, and there's so many things that we may be in our work, but there's usually one thing we're committed to making a difference about. And I think that that is where we should start. And then look at those other two things and see, what do I have that aligns to it, that gives me what they call in advertising the reasons to believe. Like, what are the reasons anybody should believe me if I'm the one? Like, thinking about Ron Finley. Here's this guy, he's an artist. Why should anybody believe him about being a gardener? So what was his reason to believe is that he not only had his own garden, but that he had actually convinced people to come on board with his garden. He started this whole community of gardeners. He got permission and he built some gardens. Now, over time, he's building his street cred that he can do this. And that's what you're all doing as you're developing from the very, very early stages. What are those reasons why anyone believes that you can speak articulately about this? So this is something that you are the one that I should follow, or you're the one whose ideas I should get on board with. So that's what I want. I want people to think about. And even as I do this, even as I talk about this, I worry because people say, "Oh, I don't have any of those things yet." I have talked to people who are in their 20s who have become unbelievable thought leaders and advocates for something as simple as not having pizza that has gluten in it, and then going out and really being this amazing, not only starting a restaurant with non-gluten foods when you have no background, but then becoming this champion for kids for healthy eating. There's a lot of people that you think, wow, she was over here and now she's over here, or vice versa, because some often, bullying comes up, or some tragic thing happens in their community and they want to get engaged with it, or something simple. They become a real expert in a better way to ship a product out the door. They become a real expert in how do you get teams to be more engaged. They may have no credibility and no expertise in those, but it's something they are so passionate about that they build that expertise and credibility over time. So I want people to just understand you can start anywhere, but if you start with something you're committed to, you're more likely to make the progress that will get you to be a voice that others will listen to.
And that commitment is just, it's difficult. You've got different things to balance in life, but I think that commitment, and I think there's a need for these kind of people, isn't there? Because these are game-changing, world-changing people, and by the sounds of it, they don't necessarily deliberately go out with the I suppose the purpose to change the world in some cases, but what they do and what they believe has such a real impact that I suppose it has a ripple effect as well, doesn't it? So
yeah, and I think about it as we all start as change agents. And if you just start about what's the change I want to bring about in the world, and that is the thing. If you think about it, the image I often use is that little drop in the pond, the first little ripple, and then the second little ripple, and the third little ripple, and we've got a tsunami over time. But that it only happens when there's lots of little ripples, and we can be that first drop. And we can see ourselves as finding others who are also in that same pond with us. That's our tribe. And if we can think in simple terms, it doesn't quite feel as intimidating. But I use this image also in my talks. I use this image of this little kitty cat, little tiny kitten, sitting in front of a giant mirror with this huge lion looking back at him, right? So this little gold cat, this giant gold lion, and he's looking at this going, I'm never going to be that. But that is the intimidating. We think I have to be this giant lion. I have to conquer all. No, sometimes we're just the little kitten. But there are days we can wake up, or there's things we can do, or people we can surround ourselves with that allow us to see ourselves as that future lion. And that's what we're walking towards, is that lion vision of ourselves that is the person who's making big change. And that's what I want. We need all these voices. We need all different voices at the table with all those ideas. And I just want to welcome everyone who's listening to this to think that, yes, you can. Yes, excellent. You can.
Excellent. And Denise, what is in the pipeline for you? What can we expect from you? You mentioned a book off air. Yes. Can we talk about the book? Can we? Or
I'm just beginning. I'm a few months into my second book, and having written the first one, I'm not sure I ever would have agreed to do a second. That I got a new idea, and now I have to do it. So the first book is this steps. The first is the individual. How does an individual go from leader to thought leader? Thank you. Ready to be a thought leader. So the second book is how do you do it across organizations or in an organization. So how I'm calling it how do you create ready to create a thought leadership culture? How do you create your whole organization to have the same mentality and to be sharing their expertise and to be building deep thought leadership beyond just the CEO? Or how do you go across organizations to come together to make bigger change happen? So I'm having so much fun interviewing people on this topic. I'm learning a ton. I have no idea the answer. I mean, I don't, with my first book, when I wrote it, I kind of knew I'd been there, I'd done it, I taught other people how to do it, I'd helped other people. Book two, don't know. So I'm kind of rolling up my sleeves. I'm getting all these projects where I'm actually helping teams of people do this and learning the hard way about how hard it is and what's exciting about it and what's fun, as well as learning from companies who've made a few steps. So I was on the phone this morning with this woman, change.org. They're making huge change in the world. And to get a sense from her about how she thinks of herself as a thought leader, but then how does she encourage people across her company, which is global, to be thinking that way and acting that way? And then how do they use their platform to build thought leadership across being change agents? And that's really fun, is to have her talking about how to be change agents for change agents. So anyway, as I said, I'm learning a lot. I always find the learning part of the book really the fun part. It's the writing that can be a bit of a slog.
Well, I tell you what, you've sparked more questions in my mind now based on your new book. So maybe when you've written your new book, then I'll read that and hopefully we can get some more questions. Yeah, because just one last point is that I was at a conference, a workshop the other day, which was talking just about what you just said in terms of, trying to I suppose get people to. It's a millennials conference, basically, trying to get the engagement between leadership and managers so that everybody's thinking along the same lines, upskilling people, all that sort of thing. So
it's not easy work.
It doesn't sound like it, but it sounds like your book could be a solution to that.
That's my hope.
We'll be looking out. We'll be looking out for it.
All in 7 steps. That's my hope.
Excellent.
All right. Well, it was really fun to talk with you today, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Denise, and we'll be looking out for your new book. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.